Welcome to the FY19 Coaching Overview. I'm Christina Feingold. I'm the Assistant Director for Manager Effectiveness in the Center for Workplace Development. I serve as a coach in our coaching program, and I am the program manager for one of the options that we'll talk about today for pursuing executive coaching. The purpose for our webinar today is twofold. So first, I'd like to provide you with a general overview of executive coaching. And second, I'll explain two ways you can participate in a coaching engagement through the Center for Workplace Development. Our agenda for today covers a few things. Specifically, I'll talk about, we have a very large staff, obviously, at the university. I'll talk about for whom this experience is designed. We often hear the word coaching, so I'd like to explain to you what coaching is and is not, and how it differs from training or perhaps some leadership programs that you might have participated in the past. I'll explain the phases involved with a coaching engagement, and I'll identify two distinct options for coaching through the Center for Workplace Development. And finally, I'll provide next steps with regard to the application process, and I'll outline deadlines for you. So in terms of our audience, coaching engagements through the Center for Workplace Development are reserved for high performers in grade 60 and above, those who are effective in their positions. And yes, of course, none of us is perfect. So those who engage with coaching recognize that they have something they want to work on, an element where they'd like to improve. Some call this a key leadership challenge. I like to point out that the coaching that we provide through CWD is not remedial coaching, which might be thought for someone who might not be doing well in their role. So that's not what we're talking about here, and I know sometimes people come with a preconceived notion about that. People seek coaching for a number of reasons. They might be seeking to develop a skill, they might be addressing a business problem, managing a transition, navigating organizational politics, just to name a few. A few examples of coaching goals might include managing a key relationship at work, establishing leadership presence on a senior team, or more generally, focusing on a strategic endeavor rather than day-to-day details, or even developing a new or existing team. Anyone who participates in a coaching engagement should really have a genuine desire to engage in the process. And I'll talk about the process in a moment, just to give you some more details. I also like to point out that in many cases, a manager or human resources might have tapped you on the shoulder to say, we think this might be a good opportunity for you. I always like to say that that's often not enough of a reason. You really need to have, as I mentioned, that genuine interest in pursuing coaching and be willing to put the work into it. So I'll talk about what that means and what that might look like. So coaching, here's a definition that we use in CWD. You may have seen it before as part of your Universal Manager training program or somewhere else. I think it's important to share this definition with you. It's obviously nothing to memorize, but I think it's important to know, and it starts the basis of people generally getting an understanding of what coaching is. So coaching is a one-on-one conversation with actions to take at the conclusion of the conversation. So it's more than just good ideas being passed back and forth. It is, there's going to be some accountability with it. It's a process of self-discovery, and coaching requires being open to learning how others experience you in your leadership role, open to holding up the mirror for self-review, and determining what's important for you and the organization, and then perhaps refining behavior. Refining behavior takes deliberate effort, it takes dedicated time and practice. And it would be easier in most cases to keep doing things the way you've always done them. And for that reason, coaching is most effective when there's a compelling need for you to change. For example, maybe you've been able to do it all up until this point, and now your department has grown, your scope has broadened, and you simply can't do it all. So now you need to figure out how to delegate and get work done through others, through your team. That might be an example of a compelling reason to undertake coaching. Coaching is an intentional and focused process in support of behavior change and refining behaviors. So in the first stage, we call that the startup. The coach, the client, which would be you, the coaching client, and sometimes your manager. And that's optional whether you're going to involve your manager or not, but sometimes they may be involved early in the process. And there'd be a conversation where you talk about and discuss preliminary goals. We discuss the coaching contract and determine a schedule for meetings. Once everyone's on the same page, the coaching engagement can begin, and then we move into exploration. So this is where the coach and the coachee would establish the current situation and what it looks like. The coach might ask questions about past history, current issues, and possible outcomes. Exploration might include internal and external politics, might be needed behavior change. We might talk about skill gaps and any other relevant issues that are kind of at play. You may often, frequently a 360-degree feedback process would be initiated, and feedback would be provided to you as the coaching client. And the engagement consists of planning, practicing, supporting, and getting more feedback. You as the coachee would choose a course of action, and you create an individual development plan. The coach would support your actions by helping to hold you accountable and help you hold yourself accountable as well. The coach would provide feedback. They help you plan to overcome obstacles that may arise and mitigate risks. And in this stage, the majority of the work is really done by you, the coachee, and it's really done in between each of the coaching sessions. So for example, if you were going to practice leadership presence in a meeting, we all have lots of meetings in the course of a week. You'd be identifying certain behaviors you wanted to practice and certain meetings where you could practice those. You'd come back to your next coaching conversation, and you'd have those to debrief and plan going forward for more practice. Finally, at the completion, the final phase, the focus is really on evaluating the achievement of the goal and completing the coaching process. In some cases, the work may continue from time to time or may eventually start up again around another goal. So you may recontract with your coach or a new coach. The ultimate goal of coaching, though, is for the coaching client to internalize what you need in order to be successful without the coach. I thought it would be helpful to talk about roles in the coaching process a bit. So I've mentioned the coach and the coachee. Let's start with the coachee or the coaching client. You would really drive the process. You own the process. So taking into consideration conversations with your manager, taking into account data in your 360-degree report, in your end-of-year feedback you've gotten all along through the year, you would set a goal and create a development plan for achieving that goal. Essentially a roadmap for what you want to accomplish through your coaching engagement. And it's a place where you can document this, and you and your coach would use it moving forward. Inherent in the development plan are typical opportunities to try out new behavior. For example, someone else might go to meetings and rather than speaking first, they might strive to listen first. They might strive to ask questions when their staff comes to them to solve a problem rather than solving the problem immediately themselves. They might strategize rather than assuming you'll fit strategizing time into your calendar. You might actually plan for for strategizing time and put it in your calendar so other day-to-day items don't knock it off, and you'd have no time to do that. The more often you choose the new behavior over the old one, the more practice you get, the more rooted it becomes in routine, and the more comfortable it is. So this requires discipline until it does get to the point where it becomes routine. In addition to those experiments that you might be doing in meetings and with your team, your coach may ask you to journal the results of your experiment, your new behavior, what happened when you tried something that seemed particularly risky, or your coach may suggest you speak with someone who does this very well or read a related article. Completing the full spectrum of assignments makes the difference in long-lasting behavior change. So you really will be working in between those coaching meetings, and I like people to just figure that into their schedule and their time as you think about, is this the right time to undertake a coaching engagement? So as I mentioned, the coachee owns the process. You also own the meetings with your coach. So you'll set them up and you'll create the agenda for those. In terms of the coach's role, the coach is going to ask inquisitive questions. They're going to guide and support the process. The coach is focused on your success. The coach helps focus you on moving forward toward achieving your goal. One of the key tenets to coaching is that the coachee, so all of you, know yourself better than anyone else does. And so you possess the answers needed to move forward. A coach will ask reflective questions to bring to bear all of your relevant knowledge and experience. The coach will listen, they'll reflect back, they may urge you to test your assumptions, try new options, they may help you leave each session with a clear set of next steps. The experiments that I referenced earlier in terms of behavior change or behavior modification are often the result of ideas that come from you, the coachee, and questions from the coach. The coachee would typically come with ideas in their development plan, and then through a conversation, the coach will help uncover other opportunities for you to experiment. The coach will certainly support you. He or she will also challenge current assumptions, push you perhaps beyond your comfort level, at least to a little bit of a degree. And then the coachee, as I mentioned, you know yourself, you know your work environment, your functional area better than anyone. So you are going to lead the process. And the coach, it's important to keep in mind, the coach is not the authority. They don't judge actions that you choose. Your coach will not share anything with anyone related to what you're working on. Your coach can help you prepare to discuss challenging subjects with other people. Coaches are all certified as executive coaches, so we hold certificates in coaching. We all sit in the Center for Workplace Development, and we are directors, we are OD consultants, and oftentimes it may make sense for you to work with some one of us who knows your school or your unit better than someone else. There are other instances where you might say, oh, I've worked with that individual a lot. Certainly they know my school. I think I could use a more neutral perspective, perhaps. And so then I can help match you with someone who doesn't know your school or your unit as much as someone else. I thought it would be helpful at this point just to mention what coaching isn't. And some of these elements may be present in coaching. It's not in and of itself coaching. So teaching, which really is a temporary, mostly one-way relationship in which the teacher is the expert transmitting information to the learner. So that's not what coaching is about. As I said, you will know more about your situation than your coach will. Mentoring is probably the most frequently confused with coaching. And in mentoring, it's typically a more experienced person sharing his or her expertise and knowledge in a one-to-one basis over time. And again, there you have the mentor as the expert, and that's not necessarily what you would find in the coaching relationship. Counseling often is used best to help people work through emotional issues and feelings, and often deals looking backward, looking to the past. Certainly, feelings come up at work too. Your coach will help you work through those as they come up, but counseling is not the core purpose of the coaching that we're doing here. And advising or consulting, so where you would obviously give advice on how to handle a situation or how to move forward. There may be moments in your conversations where your coach takes off their coaching hat and says, may I give you some advice, or would you like some consultation? And then they're using a different set of skills. And that's fairly infrequent. For the most part, we try to keep our coaching hat on and simply work through the conversation that way. So I thought it would be helpful to go through the 2 leadership coaching options that we have in the Center for Workplace Development. And before I go into those, just a footnote that we also provide onboarding coaching for new senior leaders as well. So those who are new to their roles. We also provide coaching for faculty and senior executives, but since those aren't the focus here, I just offer them as a footnote. So I'd like to differentiate individual coaching and the focused leadership program so that you can make a good decision about what you think might be most useful for you at this time. So in terms of similarities, both options begin with a 360-degree assessment. This is an opportunity to learn how your manager, your peers, and your direct reports see you in your leadership role. The tool helps point out strengths and potential areas for development. I always encourage you, participants, to talk with their manager, peers, and direct reports in advance, explaining the purpose of the 360, and that you'll be asked to participate through an online third-party vendor, and that their input is really critical in the process. In terms of additional similarities, the cost for either option, or for both options, is $1,200. In both options, it's important, as I mentioned, for upfront work to be done, gathering information about how your boss, your peers, and your direct reports view you in your leadership role. That's an important first step. There are some common tools that we use in the program. So we use the Immunity to Change from Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy at the Graduate School of Education. And this helps people understand behavior change and create strategies to be successful in making that change. And then finally, setting a goal and creating a plan for how to achieve it. Both options provide a framework for refining behavior in the form of a written development plan. Involving your manager in the process early on is an important component. There is flexibility in this. However, allowing your manager to have a voice in the goal you're working toward is an important component in the process. The cornerstone of either option, individual coaching or focused leadership, is regular individual meetings with a coach. And in both options, as I mentioned, the coaches are internal and sit within CWD. In both options, you drive the process, experimenting with new behavior, refining behaviors, and completing assignments in between. The primary difference really in the 2 options is the structural and support components that are incorporated into the focused leadership program. So I thought I'd speak a little bit about that. Focused leadership is a cohort-based program. The cohort is generally small, typically around 20 people or fewer participate each semester. You go through the elements as a cohort, and as a result, you have built-in support. Whereas with individual coaching, you would go through them individually with your coach. Focused leadership provides 5 group sessions where the cohort is together. 3 of those sessions occur before the coaching begins, 1 during the coaching, a midpoint check-in, And then the final program closing happens at the conclusion of the coaching and at the end of the program. I'd be happy to send anyone the program outline, or HR offices in your local schools and units have those. It's important to make sure that if you are interested in focused leadership, the dates work for you. When you're signing on to the program, you're signing on to participate in each of those session days in full. So making sure not to schedule meetings in between and really blocking out the time. And you'll also be incorporating a learning trio or a learning pair, depending on numbers, at the start of the program. So I match each person with a coach, and then I match each person with another a peer in the cohort. And when I match the peers, I'm looking for someone who's outside of your functional area and outside of your school or unit. Frequently, they'll be working on something similar to you. In recent cohorts, I've had people work really well together who were working on different things but complemented each other and can provide additional layer of support to one another. And then, of course, you have the formalized networking with your peers through the university, through the cohort session. So individual coaching provides 8 one-on-one sessions over the course of 6 months. And so with this, the 3 components that are incorporated into the beginning of the coaching engagement. So this is where you might use some of those sessions to go over the immunity to change. You would use one of the sessions to create your development plan. You would use one of the sessions to review your 360-degree feedback data. And then you would have 5 coaching sessions outside of that. So the components that were done as part of a cohort in focused leadership are done individually here. And there may be a little bit more flexibility. If you said, oh, I've just had a 360-degree assessment, then you could bring that data with you, perhaps. You wouldn't need an additional 360 with individual coaching. Or if you just had your year-end review, and that was a really thorough process, then perhaps that could serve as the basis for creating your individual development plan. So just a few things about next steps, particularly if you're interested in participating in the fall. So the purpose of, there is an application, and the application deadline is due very soon. So I'm actually looking at my slide, and the 360, the deadline for focused leadership, if you're participating in the summer, rather in the fall, is going to be due on, let's see, July 20th. So you want to submit that by July 20th if you're going to be participating in the fall. And if you're thinking about participating for the spring, the deadline isn't until December 18th of 2018. I like to mention that the application is really a place for you to articulate your interest in engaging with coaching. It's a place for you to describe your current leadership challenges. It's a place for you to gather initial ideas on what you might need to do differently to address those challenges. And it's a place to begin to consider what support you might need from your manager to address those challenges. I mentioned the application because sometimes people will be very brief, which is okay. However, I use those applications to make coaching matches, so it's really helpful to have more information rather than less in terms of what you're focused on. Before submitting your application, give consideration to the time commitment and your interest level. If it's not the right time for you to fully participate, it's completely fine to tell the person who's nominated you, I'd like to hold off. And that's one of the things that I think makes these info sessions so useful. People can say this isn't the right time before finding yourself in the program on day one and then not having the time to fully commit. So I also like to point out that coaches will, along with me, will read the applications and help me determine the most effective coaching matches. They're the only people who see the applications at this point, and that's really, as I mentioned, to help me make the best matches. And if you need any additional information, please feel free to contact me. My email is Christina_Feingold@harvard.edu. I put up the dates for the spring. And so if you're interested in holding off and participating in the spring, those dates are there. And this is my contact information. And you can always contact the CWD Harvard Leadership Development mailbox as well. Thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in focused leadership or in individual coaching sometime very soon. Thank you.